You know what? I know what I want to talk about. And it's something that I have been seeing a lot more lately with the conversation about Sonic and humans and all of that shit going on in the Sonic universe. I kind of want to talk about Sonic and his stupid friends. This has like been the meme in the not just the Sonic community, but like games journalism for the longest time. And I actually contributed to a video done by Ace Card Gaming talking about my favorite character in Sonic the Hedgehog, Gamma, or by extension, Omega. I prefer Omega to Gamma specifically, and I can get into why in a bit, but I think it's important to note a little bit of Sonic history. In Sonic's earlier years, and by earlier years I mean around the 10th to 15th anniversary-ish time, what could also be called the Sonic Dark Ages, after we got like Heroes, a lot of memes started coming out about Sonic's stupid friends, about how people were tired of having to play as characters that weren't Sonic in a lot of these games, which is, to me, as a kid, was kind of strange, because when I played Sonic Adventure 1, I loved the fact that I could play multiple characters. Big the Cat notwithstanding, even then, I know people who love Big. I've met Wayne, of course. But then Sonic Adventure 2, I don't mind any of the playstyles in Adventure 2. I really don't. Hell, I remember when I was a kid loving Adventure 2 so much, and even loving like the shooting playstyle so much, that I made an Egg Walker out of my combination of Legos and Mega Bloks. And I say this because I don't think we as adults tend to remember that a lot of those extra aspects of Sonic's cast were iconic at the time and were incredibly memorable. I remember making multiple like variations on Gamma's model. Just like I would draw them almost like they were trading cards, basically. And I all of this because these characters meant so much to me when I was a kid, and I couldn't give you a good argument for it back then. But I'm 30-year-old now. I'm 30-year-old now. And, you know, I bet you that I can now. As a child, I couldn't tell you why I liked Shadow and Knuckles past the fact that, hey, he's cool. Hey, they're awesome. I couldn't give you a better argument than that. But as an adult, I can sit down and tell you, no, I think Knuckles is a wonderful foil for Sonic, and I think he definitely completes the triple threat later on down the line when we get Sonic Heroes and we get actual camaraderie between all three characters in Sonic's main library. I think that Knuckles being the brawn to Sonic's speed and Tails' intellect, while that might be super cliche, I think that he works incredibly well as the foil he is, especially since he's not just a stupid moron. He's intelligent in his own right. He's just intelligent when it comes to the things that he is actually able to do. So, for instance, in the comic books all the time, if Knuckles is dealing with anything involving a temple or Chaos Emeralds or shit like that, like, he is borderline a genius in those areas, the areas that he is actually suited for. He's not a jack of all trades like Tails is, who can just be handed any technology and suddenly it'll work. He has a specific specialization. But within that specialization, he could do incredibly well. By contrast, you have someone like Tails, who is a jack of all trades, but their IQ is high enough to where if they need to match you in strength, they'll build a robot for that. If they need to match you in speed, they can build a robot for that. And this is just two of the main casts. These are the ones that people usually tolerate when it comes to, quote, Sonic's stupid friends. But let's move on to some of the other characters. I've mentioned that Gamma/Omega are my favorite characters in the entire franchise. Everybody who's played Sonic Adventure 1 knows that Gamma has an incredibly tragic backstory. The idea of a robot being created with all of the mechanisms for sentience, having to be essentially a slave, and seeing all of his family members almost get tortured and belittled and, as far as he can tell, experimented on and even destroyed, by what functionally is his dad, and then having to essentially commit suicide in a children's game. Like, come on. Come on. Like, that is a compelling motif for a character, no matter what situation you put them in. It is a heartbreaking scenario to have to endure. And when you move him onto Omega, with the transitionary period of Sonic Battle to go in there, we see a character who is just as jaded towards Eggman as Gamma was at the end. And as a character, Omega goes through several arcs of his own. I know that we get Sonic 06 as a game gets railed on all the time, but in that game, you can see Omega literally force himself to tell Shadow that he's the one that's going to have to actually destroy him in the future. He's the one who's going to have to actually beat him. Because it turns out, Eggman, much like he made Metal Sonic to match Sonic blow for blow in the speed department, Omega can match Shadow blow for blow. The difference is, and this isn't something given to us in the games, this is kind of something that I've just inferred, Eggman has design docs for Shadow because he has access to the Space Colony Arc. He has access to Gerald's documents. It would make sense that the reason he's able to make Omega a polar opposite for Shadow, something that can handle him as easily as he can, is because he's got design specs on Project Shadow, something he does not have for someone like Sonic. So while Omega can handle Shadow pretty well, and I'll get to Shadow in a second, Sonic is able to handle Shadow, or Shadow may not be able to handle Sonic. And other characters might not be able to handle Sonic because they are not purpose-made for that. And the fact that Shadow and Omega become best friends, and Omega has to wrestle with the fact that he is designed to kill his best friend, that functionally being your destiny in the future, you seeing the end results of that, that's like you seeing your best friend's corpse and you are sitting there with the gun, turning around to a past version of you and just explaining that he had to do it. That is the scenario that you're presented with Omega, and we get a very limited range of emotion because he's a robot, but that gives us the chance to process it ourselves. It also prevents the game from accidentally giving us more cringy dialogue where that's concerned. But moving on to other of Sonic's stupid friends, the biggest meme in the entire franchise is Big the Cat. And at some point, I will convince everyone on Sunset City to actually do the episode functionally Why Big the Cat Matters, or Best of Big the Cat, because I think Big serves a purpose in the Sonic universe that a lot of people don't credit him for. And IDW, the comics that Ian Flynn and Evan Stanley and others write for IDW and Sega, gave me insight into what that position in the universe is for Big. He's not supposed to be the main character. He's the observer. He's the one, he's functionally, he's the straight man. Everything in Sonic's universe is topsy-turvy. There's an apocalyptic event happening every other Thursday, and Big, he is there to watch. He is there to watch almost emotionlessly while he just tries to live his life. The reason that IDW clued me onto this, and it started to contextualize some of the other games for me, there is a moment in the IDW comics where you get to see Big the Cat as he exists in the Metal Virus arc, functionally the zombie apocalypse for the Sonic series. This man literally floats through major events of the story until finally he does actually get infected as well. But you see him just exist through all of this in it's an extra bit of media for IDW, and it is fascinating to watch just functionally a powerless everyman just float through all of the wacky chaos of what goes on in IDW's story for Sonic. And it's only a side thing, but it only has to be. And the reason that I point this out, I want you guys to remember that the only times we've been able to play as Big he has been fulfilling that role. He's basically a tag-along for Amy and Cream in Sonic Heroes. I mean, Froggy being missing again is certainly motivation, but realistically, he's not getting any development there. And in Sonic Adventure, he's pretty much just following Froggy, who's a MacGuffin for somebody else's story. But he's always just kind of there in the background. The biggest one, though, and this one is somewhat maybe kind of canon. It depends on how the writers are feeling at the time. But I want you guys to think about Sonic Adventure 2. In almost every level, Big is there. Big is just around the world somewhere watching random shit happen. He's in the Space Colony Ark inexplicably. He's randomly running beside you when the gunmobile is chasing you in City Escape. This man is everywhere important. He's just not doing anything because he's not the hero, and the story doesn't need him to be that. As such, it doesn't focus on him, nor does it need to. He's the observer. Big was in City Escape? Yes, he's running on the right-hand side of City Escape when you are running away from the gun truck. Go ahead, boot it up on Steam. That bit is missing from the GameCube release of the game, but it is in the original Dreamcast release, and it is in the HD re-release on Steam. So in almost every version of the game, yes, he's there. In every complete version, he's there. On top of this, we constantly meme that, oh, everybody hates Big. Everyone hates Big. Everybody hates his character. But really, why? There's nothing there to hate. It's just a meme in the community. At the end of the day, he's basically harmless. And yeah, playing as him mechanically might have been dull in Sonic Adventure, but really, that's not that big a deal. Now, moving on, I don't think many people have an issue with Amy, by contrast. But at the same time, Amy has been there since Sonic CD. And realistically, the worst you can hand her is that she's a little bit cringe. But even that gets cleaned up later on down the line. The Amy that we see in pretty much every version of Sonic after Unleashed has kind of stripped away most of the cringiest elements of her character. I wish that she would come into her own more, but that's what we have the IDW comics for. A lot of her character traits are kind of carbon copy grafted away from Sally Acorn, but I don't think that's a bad thing. She's a character that has been able to hold her own against Sonic's various enemies after Sonic Adventure. Like, Adventure 1 is the story of Amy learning how to exist as more than a damsel in distress in Sonic's world. Adventure 2 is the story of her trying to keep up with everybody in Sonic's world. And her contributions in that story can't really be dismissed. You have to remember, this is a character who was able to convince Shadow the Hedgehog that he needed to continue helping to save the world. She's not a nothing character in that story, despite being the damsel in distress once, when Eggman finally showed us he knows how to wield a Glock. Now, we do get in Heroes and Onward a much more forward-fighting Amy. A confused Amy. More than once we get the trope of, oh, Sonic! Oh no, I hugged somebody who isn't Sonic. This was funny when it was Shadow, and now it's Silver, and also Sonic, but this time he's a werehog. And yeah, I can get that particular joke gets old, but I really don't think Amy was that harmful of a character when we get past that point. And even in Unleashed, I think Amy is perfectly bearable as a character. Hell, outside of the random trope, in 06, I would say that Amy is a perfectly serviceable character, all things considered. She does with Silver what she did with Shadow in Adventure 2. She helps him grow. She helps him realize what side he's really on. Those characters would not have managed it without that. By and large, the most popular character in the Sonic franchise, outside of Sonic himself, the most marketable character of all time is likely Shadow the Hedgehog, if we're moving on to that. Shadow is a character who has been severely mishandled, but if you think about his arc in Sonic Adventure 2, and even in Heroes, I think Adventure 2, Heroes, and 06, maybe not Shadow the Hedgehog specifically, but certainly in 06, we get a Shadow that goes through a very comprehensive character arc of finding himself, dealing with amnesia, dealing with who he is as a character, moving away from being somebody's enemy, and serving who he chooses in the end. Firespark says there's a video of a guy saying Sonic fans are blind, nostalgic fan bases accepting anything. Well, of course. There's going to be people who say that Sonic fans are blind and nostalgic and accept anything. Here's the thing, though. It's one thing to be blind and say, I just like it, or it's a kid's franchise. It's another thing to sit here and back up the things that you're saying with argumentation, with examples. Shadow as a tragic character in 06 and having his final moment against Mephiles where he takes off his power rings, that is a moment that we have not gotten again in any capacity. And I want to see character moments like that come back. I want to see character moments like that come back for him when we get the third movie. I want to see a lot more done with this character over and above the Vegeta of Sonic. I know there's disagreements I have with a few of my friends on the actual purpose Shadow should serve. I like him being the Vegeta of the series, but I think that, like Vegeta, he should have a complete arc and then not just become the edgy bad boy to Sonic's I exist. Now, that's all of the characters up to Adventure 2, and we haven't gotten a whole lot of new characters since then. We've gotten one-offs like Merlina and Shara and Eraser Jin. We've gotten some recurring characters like Blaze, but honestly, Blaze has never had enough of a story presence outside of Rush to really have many complaints about. Maybe there can be a couple complaints levied at Cream, but even then, I don't think there's much of an issue for her. If Cream basically just ended up being Amy's variant of Tails, then that's fine. And I mean, in Heroes and a few other bits of media, that's kind of what she is. She's a kid sidekick that can be with Amy in the same way that Tails can be with Sonic. She's not properly utilized that way all the time, but she definitely could be. I don't think there's really much of a reason to hate her character, or even most of the other characters I've listed. Manga Mata Shava, thank you for the 100 bits. Almost every character for Sonic gets mishandled, misutilized. And I think that's where things go wrong. The Sonic stories that only feature the core cast of Sonic characters, I don't feel as strongly about them. Like, yeah, I love the story of Unleashed, but if you give me something like Sonic Generations, which literally just has the core cast and then everybody else in the background, it's a giant nothing burger. Most of these characters have taken such a big backseat, they not only can't get developed anymore, but they might as well not even be there. And I kind of want to see that change in the future. I don't need to have a play everybody all the time extravaganza like Heroes. Lord knows that was executed very poorly. But I do want to see some of these characters maintain their place again. The best example of this that I can think of is the IDW comic series. And I know that falling back on that all the time is not the greatest thing, but I do have a couple of examples here. The Zeti are shown to have a fully fleshed out ideology in the IDW Sonic series. The Chaotix literally get to run their detective agency. Instead of just being side characters that show up in other people's stories, they have their own story that is happening constantly within that universe. They have a job to do, and when they are brought into service, by Sonic's cast, they are brought into service and they have to get paid because they are their own characters. They're not attachments to the main cast. Even Shadow and Rouge, and I haven't even talked about Rouge, but even Shadow and Rouge get to have more moments where they are functionally just Team Dark. Instead of just being accessories to Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles in whatever story they happen to be in, they get to be fleshed out on their own. Omega gets so much screen time during the Metal Virus arc. It's awesome. And yeah, Shadow getting mishandled in that arc still kind of irks me. But I'm glad that we get more of Shadow later on. Seeing Shadow and Amy and Cream and Rouge during the Chow Race arc, a lot of people might say that that's a slowish arc in the IDW series, but honestly, seeing those characters interact and seeing Shadow just functionally have a Amy break his legs moment when they find out that the Chows have been basically bred like fighting pit bulls, stuff like that humanizes those characters for me. Stuff like that makes me relate to those characters. You know who I don't care about in Sonic? Functionally, truly. I don't care about Sonic. I don't. It's like with Dragon Ball Z. I don't care about Goku. I don't think I've ever cared about Goku. It was pretty much when Vegeta hopped on the screen in that series that he became my favorite character. He was interesting. I wanted to see how his story developed. And the entirety of DBZ was me watching Vegeta develop. Because that's how it's supposed to be. Goku's a flat character. That doesn't make him boring. That doesn't make him bad. That means he has a job to do, and that job is different than the job of a character who needs to go through an arc. The flat character already has all the answers. That's their job. They teach every other character the lessons that they've already learned, either on or off screen. The flat character's job is to let other people grow. There's a moment in the IDW comic series that I think exemplifies this the most, and if it weren't for this being a licensed property, I think that we would have gotten something out of this. In the beginning of the IDW comic series, we do not see Dr. Eggman. We instead see a brainwashed human being called Mr. Tinker. He has suffered amnesia from all the events that happened in Sonic Forces, and he is basically just a good guy with all of the mechanical knowledge of Eggman. He's able to repair anything, build anything. He's a super genius without the evil motivations, and trauma literally beat those out of him. He gets his memories back later on, but there's a moment during the Metal Virus arc. There's a moment where Eggman and Starline are fighting Sonic in the middle of a zombie-infested city, and Sonic is shrieking at Eggman almost in a panic that he had a chance to be good. He literally enriched other people's lives for such a long time. And he could have been happy just doing that. It's not Dr. Starline's fault that we lost Mr. Tinker. Eggman made the active decision after he was rewired again to maintain that persona. He didn't lose the memories of being Mr. Tinker. He didn't even lose the good feelings about it. And you see Eggman take pause. You see his facial features break. And for a moment, although brief, he considers a different timeline. One where he could be Mr. Tinker. One where he could be a good guy. And then he falls back on old habits. And explains that that was fun, but that's not who he is. I feel like were this not a licensed property where everything needs to, in sitcom-like fashion, go back to the way it was, I think we could have actually gotten a different Eggman at that moment. Because that's the moment that we get a different Shadow. That's the moment where we've gotten different variations of other characters. It's those moments of consideration that cause characters like Knuckles to switch sides, that cause... It's that moment with Amy doing that exact thing almost to Shadow that causes him to realize that, no, I don't need to make humanity suffer. That isn't my fight. And moreover, that's not what my loved one even wanted in the first place. That's the job of a flat character. They make other people grow. While I may think that Sonic is the least interesting character of the whole series, the way other characters bounce off of him is always interesting. Seeing the moral dilemmas that are thrown at him when he lets characters like Zavik live after all of the people that they have, let's go ahead and make no bones about it, that they have killed down on their planet. At the end of the day, that character still gets challenged. Those ideals are still thrown back in their face. And that's a good thing. That shows other characters who are equally flat. Zavik is a flat character too, but he's on the opposite side morally as Sonic. Eggman has a little more wiggle room. We've seen him have that wiggle room at the end of Sonic Adventure 2, at that critical moment in the IDW series. And if Sonic's stupid friends shouldn't be there, then we wouldn't have all of these other characters that Sonic can influence. This is a licensed property. He cannot influence Eggman. He cannot influence anyone. If we just had the core Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Eggman, we'd have the same story over and over again, and there would be no change. The heroes would beat the bad guys, and everybody would just pack it up and go home. We wouldn't get moments like Shadow's death at the end of Adventure 2. We wouldn't get moments like Silver's heel turns in 06. We wouldn't get moments like Eggman reconsidering his entire life, even if for a brief moment. We wouldn't get Omega having to explain to his friend that in the future he's going to kill him. We don't get moments like Rouge at the end of Heroes having to debate with herself without any dialogue being given to the player at all on whether or not she's going to inform Shadow that she's just found a cloning facility filled with tanks that have copies of him. She has to make the active decision not to give that information to Shadow, not to make him have the existential crisis that would come from that. But we wouldn't get any of that if we didn't have, quote, Sonic's stupid friends. I want to see those characters come back, not just the characters that we've had in past games, because that'll just lead us to having more flat character arcs. I want to see more Silvers, more Shadows. I want to see characters like Infinite brought in again. But I want to see them executed well. I think one of the reasons Infinite doesn't work is he never gets a real resolution. He's not even given clear motivations. There's really no reason for Infinite to be there in that story. But we could have him back. We could have another crack at that story where his character is explained properly. And I think we can. We just have to have the right people writing. Luckily, for Sonic Frontiers, we do have Ian Flynn writing this time around. At the very least, he's consulting the writing staff. Hopefully, somebody who understands the characters as well as him will be able to actually get Sega to utilize their characters well, instead of letting them be set pieces for Sonic's story. Because the least interesting part of almost any Sonic game is Sonic's story. Even Sonic's story in Adventure is eclipsed by the tragedy of Gamma's story, by the triumphant nature of Tails' story, by the quiet contemplation of Knuckles' story. Sonic's story is a basic hero romp in that game. Everyone else gets to go through major arcs and shifts of their ideologies. One of them even dies. But they're just Sonic's stupid friends, right? We don't need them in future games. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. There's certainly characters that I've missed. There's certainly bits that I've missed, but we're already sitting at a half hour in this little conversation anyway. So when this uploads over onto Nekosaurus, let me know in the comments section below what you think, how you feel about these various characters. Is there a character you want to see come back? Is there an archetype that you want to see used? Let me know. And hell, maybe we'll even continue that conversation there. I might even springboard off of that. Anyways, as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.